The first thing you notice isn't the siren. It's the sudden silence in your own car when everything else around you keeps moving like nothing happened. You're driving home, maybe tired, maybe just thinking about your day, and then, out of nowhere, that faint reflection of red and blue starts pulsing in your rearview mirror. At first, you tell yourself it's not for you. Then the lights stay with you. Then you feel that quiet tightening in your chest as you realize you're being pulled over. You signal, you slow down, and you try to replay the last few minutes of driving in your head like a courtroom replay that might save you from what's coming next. The officer steps out, hand resting near the belt, not aggressive but not relaxed either. And suddenly, every small decision you made on the road feels like it's under a microscope. Let me ask you something honestly, and I want you to think back to your own experience for a moment. Have you ever been pulled over and felt like even before you spoke, the officer had already formed an opinion about you, just based on how you were driving or how you reacted in those first 10 seconds? Now, I want you to actually share that in the comments, because the way people experience traffic stops is far more revealing than most realize. And the reason I'm asking you this is because what most drivers never understand is that a suspension of your license rarely comes from one dramatic mistake. It usually comes from habits, patterns, small repeated decisions that quietly build up until the system finally catches up with you. And here's the part most people don't hear until it's too late. Some of the most common driving behaviors that lead to a suspended license are not always the ones people think are serious at first glance. In fact, some drivers genuinely believe they are just normal habits of driving in a busy country like the United States. But from a legal and enforcement point of view, those habits can slowly stack penalties, points, violations, and administrative flags that eventually take your driving privilege away completely. The moment you understand how officers think during a stop, everything changes. A traffic stop is not just about what you did 5 seconds ago. It's about patterns. It's about risk assessment. The officer is constantly reading behavior, scanning for inconsistencies, watching hands, voice tone, eye movement, reaction time. Not because they are trying to intimidate you, but because in their experience, small details often tell a bigger story. When you're nervous, you think silence helps you. But sometimes silence raises more questions. When you over-explain, you think you're being cooperative, but sometimes it looks like deflection. When you reach for documents too fast, it can trigger caution. When you hesitate too long, it can also trigger suspicion. The reality is uncomfortable, but traffic stops are psychological interactions as much as they are legal ones. And that's exactly why certain driving habits don't just lead to tickets. They quietly build toward license suspension, especially when repeated or combined. Let's talk about the first habit that many drivers underestimate until it starts stacking points on their record in a way they don't notice until renewal time or until a letter arrives in the mail. Speeding is often treated like a casual violation. Many drivers think of it as keeping up with traffic or just going a bit over. But the legal system doesn't interpret it the same way drivers do emotionally. There is a difference between minor speeding and what is considered reckless or excessive speeding, and that difference matters far more than people realize. In a real-world traffic stop, an officer isn't just clocking your speed. They are observing how you were driving relative to surroundings. Were you weaving? Were you tailgating? Did you brake late? Did you accelerate aggressively after turns? All of that builds a narrative. And here's where it becomes serious. In many US states, once speeding crosses certain thresholds, it doesn't just become a fine, it becomes a points-based violation that contributes directly toward license suspension. Multiple speeding tickets in a short time frame can escalate quickly into administrative action, even if none of them individually seemed catastrophic. Now picture a scenario. You're on a highway, flow of traffic is fast, you push a little more than usual because you're late. You get pulled over. The officer approaches, asks for license and registration. You think it's routine, but then they ask the question that always matters more than people expect. Do you know how fast you were going? Your answer here is not just about honesty, it's about perception. Officers hear hundreds of responses. They can tell when someone is guessing, minimizing, or becoming defensive. And depending on your driving history, that one stop might not be isolated. It might be part of a pattern already visible in the system. The second habit is even more dangerous, because it doesn't just risk your license, it can end your driving privilege instantly in some cases. Driving under the influence, whether alcohol or drugs, is one of the fastest ways to move from a simple traffic stop into a legal crisis. And what most people misunderstand is how early impairment is detected. Officers don't need dramatic signs. They look for subtle ones: delayed speech, inconsistent eye focus, overcorrecting the steering wheel, confusion about basic questions. Even prescription medication can complicate things if it affects reaction time or alertness. And in a roadside situation, your explanation often matters less than observable behavior. Imagine being asked to step out of the vehicle. The door closes behind you. The highway noise suddenly feels distant. The officer asks you to follow a simple instruction like walking straight or keeping balance. In your mind, you feel fine. But the evaluation isn't based on your feeling, it's based on coordination under pressure. What makes this habit especially dangerous in terms of license suspension is that even a first-time offense in many states can lead to immediate suspension or restriction, sometimes before court even resolves the case. That means your driving life can be paused long before you ever stand before a judge. Now, the third habit is where many completely legal-minded drivers unknowingly fall into trouble. Driving with suspended registration, expired insurance, or even unknowingly driving on a suspended license due to unpaid fines or missed court appearances. This is where things get complicated because many drivers assume that if they are stopped for a minor issue, it stays minor. But in a traffic stop, when an officer runs your information, everything comes up: insurance status, registration validity, license points, outstanding violations, warrants in some cases, and if something is flagged, the entire nature of the stop changes instantly. You might have been pulled over for a broken tail light, but suddenly the conversation shifts. The officer's tone changes slightly. They step away from the car to verify information. The wait becomes longer. And when they return, it's no longer about a warning. This is one of the most common pathways to immediate administrative suspension. Not because of dangerous driving, but because of compliance failure. The system in the United States is heavily dependent on paperwork validity. If your documents are not in order, your legal right to drive can be suspended, even if your actual driving behavior was safe. And here is something many people don't realize until they experience it firsthand. During that waiting period, while the officer is checking your information, they are not just verifying data. They are also assessing your behavior while you wait. Are you calm? Are you fidgeting? Are you trying to exit the vehicle? Are passengers reacting differently? All of that becomes part of the overall assessment. The fourth habit is one that has grown rapidly in modern driving culture and is quietly becoming one of the most common contributors to point accumulation. Distracted driving, especially mobile phone use. Texting while driving, checking notifications, or even quick glances at screens might feel harmless in the moment, but enforcement has become extremely strict in many states. And unlike older violations that required clear intent or obvious danger, distracted driving laws are often enforced based on observation alone. Picture this. You are driving, phone in hand, briefly at a red light. The light turns green, you move forward slightly delayed. A patrol car notices that hesitation. That alone can be enough for a stop. Now, during the stop, the officer may already have a reasonable suspicion based on what they saw. And when they ask if you were using your phone, your response becomes critical. Many drivers instinctively deny it or minimize it, but officers often already observe the behavior. The deeper issue here is accumulation. One distracted driving ticket might not suspend your license, but combine it with speeding or prior violations, and suddenly your record becomes a pattern of unsafe driving behavior in the eyes of the law. And the uncomfortable truth is that modern enforcement systems don't always judge each incident in isolation. They evaluate driving history as a behavioral profile. The fifth habit is less about a single action and more about how drivers respond once they are already in trouble. Failure to comply, evading stops, refusing lawful instructions, or repeatedly missing court dates tied to traffic violations. This is where many drivers unintentionally escalate minor issues into major legal consequences. There is a moment in some traffic stops where everything hinges on cooperation. Step out of the vehicle when asked. Provide documents when requested. Follow instructions even if you disagree with the situation. The law, in most cases, gives officers authority to control the flow of a stop for safety reasons. What many drivers don't realize is that resistance doesn't have to be dramatic to have consequences. Even small acts like refusing to provide identification clearly, arguing excessively at the roadside, or repeatedly ignoring instructions can escalate a simple stop into something far more serious. And then there's the administrative side that people forget entirely. Missing court dates or ignoring traffic citations doesn't make them disappear. In fact, it often leads to automatic suspension notices. Many people only discover their license is suspended when they are stopped again for something unrelated, which creates a chain reaction of penalties. Now think about how all of this connects. Speeding leads to points. Distracted driving adds more. A paperwork issue triggers a stop. A nervous or defensive reaction escalates it. A missed court date finalizes the suspension. It's rarely one moment, it's a sequence. And officers on the roadside are trained to recognize patterns quickly. They don't just see the current violation, they see the system context around it. That's why sometimes a minor traffic stop feels unexpectedly serious to drivers. It's not always about the moment, it's about everything that led up to it. What I want you to understand from all of this is not fear, but awareness. Because most drivers don't get suspended licenses because they are reckless every single day. They get there through repetition, misunderstanding, and underestimating how small actions accumulate in a legal system designed to track behavior over time. And the next time those lights appear behind the vehicle, the real question isn't just what happened in the last minute of driving. It's what patterns the system has already recorded long before that moment even began.